was opened for signature in 1968 and entered into force in 1970. Mauritius ratified the treaty in April 1969. The objective of the treaty is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology, to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, and to further the goal of achieving nuclear disarmament and general and complete disarmament. It is also noteworthy that Mauritius has signed an agreement with the International Atomic Energy Agency for the application of safeguards in connection with a treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Mr. Speaker, sir, insofar as the Pelindaba Treaty is concerned, it was opened for signature on 11th April 1996 and came into effect on 15th July 2009 after having obtained the required number of ratifications. Mauritius signed the treaty on 11th April 1996 and ratified it on 24th of April 1996. Mauritius joined the Pelindaba Treaty given our position and commitment to non-proliferation and commitment to promoting cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Since then, Mauritius has not changed its policy on the matter. Under the Pelindaba Treaty, Mauritius has undertaken not to conduct research on, develop, manufacture, stockpile, or otherwise acquire, possess, or have control over any nuclear explosive device by any means anywhere. Not to take any action to assist or encourage the research on, development, manufacture, stockpiling or acquisition or possession of any nuclear explosive device. To prohibit in its territory the stationing of any nuclear explosive device. However, Article 4.2 of the Pelindaba Treaty provides that without prejudice to the purposes and objectives of the treaty, each party, in the exercise of its sovereign rights, remains free to decide for itself whether to allow visits by foreign ships and aircrafts to its ports and airfields, transits of its airspace by foreign aircraft, and navigation by foreign ships in its territorial sea or archipelagic waters in a manner not covered by the rights of innocent passage, archipelagic sea lane passage, or transit passage of straits. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to Part E of the question, I would like to point out that the jetty infrastructure is meant for berthing and movement of ships of length 149 meters and drawing draft of 9 meters. As of now, it is not envisaged that the facility will operate as a full-fledged port. In any case, as I stated earlier, the facilities will be eventually vested in the government of Mauritius and their management, and operations will be under the charge of the relevant authorities of the government of Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, sir, it should be brought out that at present, the Mauritius Ports Authority has jurisdiction only over the ports of Port Louis and Port Maturin, as specified in the schedule to the Ports Act 1998. Should the jetty in Agalega be eventually declared as a port, it would have to be included within the ambit of the Ports Act through appropriate amendment to the schedule of the Act. It would also require appropriate amendment to the Outer Islands Development Corporation Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, insofar as the new airstrip is concerned, it will be managed by the Department of Civil Aviation as provided for under the Civil Aviation Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to part F of the question.
Wait, let Prime Minister. There is no cross-talking. This is a P&Q. May I remind you? Please.
In regard to part F of the question, I am informed that the residential quarters and dormitories are being constructed for use by the personnel who will be posted on the island and who will be responsible for the operations and management of this new infrastructure. The residential quarters and dormitories will have a total bed capacity of approximately 140, which are being constructed near the airstrip area. Additional accommodation with bed capacity of 22 is being constructed near the jetty. Both take into account the future needs of the island in line with our long-term vision of the development of that part of our territory. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to part G of the question, I am informed by the National Housing Development Corporation that in January 2018, the Outer Islands Development Corporation sought the professional expertise and assistance of the Ministry of Housing and Land Use Planning for the construction of housing units in Agalega. Funds to the tune of 40 million rupees were provided in the budget of 2018-2019 for the construction of 50 housing units by the NHDC Limited at Agalega. The contract for consultancy services was awarded on 8th of May 2019 to Lux Consult Mauritius Limited for the sum of 6.25 million rupees. I am further informed that officers of the Ministry of Housing and Land Use Planning carried out a site visit at Agalega together with officers of the NHDC Limited and the consultant Lux Consult Mauritius Limited in December 2021 to hand over sites identified for the housing project to the consultant. Revised bidding documents and cost estimates have already been submitted by the consultant to the NHDC. The 50 housing units will be single-story duplex type concrete structure with corrugated iron sheet roof. 36 units will be located in the North Island at Village 25 and 14 units in the South Island at Village Sainte Rita. Each housing unit will have a net floor area of about 55.1 square meter and will consist of 2 bedrooms, 1 kitchen, 1 dining living area, a combined toilet and bathroom and a veranda. Given that the existing roads in Agalega are mostly sandy and consists of coral, the same type of road of width 3 to 3.5 meters will be provided within the housing estates. The housing units will comprise the following facilities. Individual rainwater harvesting system will be provided to each housing unit. 2 desalination plants will be constructed. Electricity will be provided through generators. A common photovoltaic system including batteries, and a distribution board will be provided to supply each duplex. And wastewater will be disposed of through individual septic tanks and absorption pits. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed by the NHDC that the revised estimated cost of the project is around 347 million rupees as at 28th of July 2022. Exclusive of management project time frame is as follows. The bidding documents which have been received in July 2022 are expected to be submitted to the Central Procurement Board on 1st August 2022. The tender exercise will be carried out between September and November 2022. Tender will be awarded in December 2022, and works are expected to start early 2023 and expected to be completed by December 2024. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know that India has been assisting Mauritius all the way from our independence to help us develop our economy, uplift and modernize infrastructure, improve community facilities, and enhance the quality of life of our citizens. This has been possible thanks to our special relationship and partnership with India, which have been consolidated over time by this government. We should show gratitude towards India instead of casting suspicion over a genuine partnership. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I'm casting suspicion on the Prime Minister. I will start, Mr. Speaker, by reminding the House that when you pretend, I'm not saying who, but when you pretend that you don't know something, and it is obvious that this information is available, it is equivalent to misleading the House, and you will remember, Mr. Speaker, that Honourable Amber Rudd resigned as Home Secretary in the UK because she pretended she did not know something that was in her files. I'll start with this, Mr. Speaker. It's good that I mention it. Now, as far as foreign military personnel that might be coming in the next few months to Agalega, and it also concerns the human resource plan for Agalega. The Prime Minister said on Tuesday that he was not yet aware of the human resource needs, yet the project, the airport, is 88% complete, 12% left. What sort of government is the Prime Minister running if he tells us that a project that is 88% complete is unable to tell us what are the skill sets required, what is the training required, what are the people in Mauritius who are willing to go there? Isn't this, Mr. Speaker, all done on purpose so that at the time of opening, we say there are no Mauritians available and it is all, in fact, staffed by foreign personnel? Why isn't there a proper human resource plan for Agalega?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I've already replied last Tuesday precisely what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is mentioning, that it is at this time, it is still premature because the project is not going to be completed until next year. So, of course, we will have an assessment of the human resource requirement to man the airstrip and to man the jetty, and the needful will be done as usual, as we have always been doing with regard to any provisions that government will have to make.
Mr. Speaker, he has told us, tried to get us confused between Mauritius Ports Authority and the Department of Civil Aviation. I'm talking about operation. Who will operate the jetty? You said no one will operate the jetty, apparently. It's just going to layer just to look good. Who will operate the airport? And I mentioned IML, who, for a subsidiary, manages Rodrigues, by the way. I'm asking the Prime Minister whether IML, who is a sole airport operator, is going to manage the supposed civilian airport at Rodrigues, and if not, why not?
Well, the leader of the opposition is confused. I understand he's confused, especially at this time. But again, the authorities concerned will be mandated to take over and to manage those infrastructure.
Speaker, this is a question of sovereignty. This is a question of militarization of one of our territories. So I would have, at the least I would have expected of the Prime Minister is for him to come clean, and if necessary, we can come back to more PNQs. It's not a problem for me. Now I'd like to ask the Prime Minister. There has been stated by the then Vice Prime Minister, by yourself, that there exists a bilateral agreement with India concerning maritime security and concerning Agalega. So I would like to ask you a precise question this time. This bilateral agreement concerning Agalega, when was it signed and how long is it valid for? 5 years, 50 years, 100 years, lifetime? And secondly, what are the conditions for if ever someone in another government wants to rescind that agreement, what are the conditions? So what is the length of the agreement and what are the conditions for eventually resuming our full sovereignty there?
Speaker, sir, I can see clearly when the leader of the opposition talks about it is a question of the sovereignty of our country, clearly implying that we are... That the people will judge this kind of attack, not only against the state of Mauritius, but also attacking India as a country. Attacking India, because you are implying that we are giving sovereignty to India. This is what you are saying.
On both sides.
But anyway, of course, we assume our responsibility. I have numerous times stated that the issue of sovereignty does not even arise. There is no question of giving any sovereignty to any other country, for that matter. But now the leader of the opposition wants to know about, again, he has put the same questions before, I have answered, but he doesn't understand. He puts the same question again. I have said that there is a confidentiality clause in this agreement, and therefore I cannot divulge the contents of this agreement.
Speaker, one is a question of sovereignty, and we are allowed to doubt as he has not given any information. It is all confidential. So you cannot, I am not being accused of high treason, Mr. Speaker. I am doing my work and I will continue to do my work. Whether he wants to bring it on a communal basis or not, I will do my work, and do not try to fan the communal flames. That is also a bit of advice I give you. Now, I will do my work. I am asking you, the agreement that was signed with India, how long is it for, and what are the conditions attached to eventually ending the agreement? This information, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister owes it to the nation.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I have never accused the Honourable Leader of the Opposition of communal attacks. What I have said is that of course, he is free to criticize us as a government, but he is attacking the government of India. He is attacking India as a country. This is what I said. If he doesn't know the distinction, but maybe I can feel le naturel est en train de venir. C'est pour ça qu'il est en train de dire qu'on m'accuse d'être communal. But anyway, being communal, I can give you examples of how communal your alliance, l'Alliance de l'Espoir, has been. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, sir, I repeat again, I have stated that there is a confidentiality clause, and it is for both countries to agree whether we will release the terms and conditions of the agreement. So since there is a confidentiality clause and it has been agreed between the two countries that we are not going to release the terms and conditions of this agreement.
The Prime Minister is aware of dozens of articles in the Indian press, mentioning all the time the military base. Our embassy here, his office here, has never raised one little finger. One little finger you've never raised to deny that. And now you accuse me of Indian bashing. When you are being accused of high treason, now I'll tell you this, Mr. Speaker.
What you're doing.
I'm telling you this.
Mr. Speaker, sir, on a point of order, would the Honourable Leader of the Opposition remove the accusation of high treason?
Accuse anyone of high treason.
You say I'm being accused.
You are being accused.
So,
He's being accused. I've not accused him. I said he is being accused of high treason.
Honourable,
Why have I accused you? Have I accused you of high treason?
Honourable,
Understand English?
Honourable Leader
Yes.
of the Opposition, you listen to me. In spite of I am on my feet and I am the Speaker. Yeah? You say you've been accused.
You are being accused.
You're being accused.
Yes.
So I order you
Sorry?
to remove that part of being accused of high treason.
He's not being accused of high treason. I'll remove it.
Thank you.
But other people obviously are accusing him. I don't know who they are. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Honourable Prime Minister. These are bases when you sign an agreement in the name of the population for an undetermined period with a foreign power, and you refuse, unlike Seychelles, everywhere else, to disclose that agreement. That is, Mr. Speaker, unacceptable. And I maintain it. It is unacceptable in a democratic country. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go now to the famous Boeing 737. Is the Prime Minister expecting commercial Boeing 737s to land in Agalega? And if he doesn't know, a commercial Boeing 737 takes 215 passengers. Incoming, outgoing 430 passengers. The airport, Mr. Prime Minister, you said yourself caters for 50. So what? There will be 400 people sitting in the garden, according to you, if you have commercial airplanes? Is that your planning, your vision for the future? Or are you in fact just not owning to the fact that these Boeing 737s are in fact Poseidon, armed anti-submarine vessels? I'm saying, I may not be against, I may not be for, but I need to know what is being signed in the name of the population of Mauritius.
Speaker, sir, Leader of the Opposition started by again saying that there have been numerous contracts or agreements that have been signed and that have been disclosed and mentioning about other countries. Instead of mentioning about other countries, he should mention about any example of his when he was in a Labour PMSD government. When questions were being asked in this same National Assembly with regard to the Jingfei agreement that was signed with the government, between the government of Mauritius and the People's Republic of China. Now, did they disclose the terms and conditions of the contract? What was the answer that was given in this National Assembly? He was a senior member of that government, and they were saying that there is a confidentiality clause that we cannot disclose the terms and conditions of this agreement. That was good at that time for him. Now he is taking exception to why is it that one agreement is not being disclosed, the terms and conditions, because there is a confidentiality clause. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I have said that numerous times that there is that the airstrip, of course at that time it was going to be upgraded, but then we decided that since we are getting grant money from the government of India, we would like to have a much bigger airstrip so that it can accommodate bigger aircrafts for the future. And again, I repeat, any type of aircraft from any foreign country who wishes to use the facilities of the airstrip in Agalega, they will have to, as it is done for Mauritius, they will have to apply and they will have to get our consent in order to be able to land and to use the facilities. And this is the same that obtains here. And there have been, in the past, under previous governments, there have been requests for either civil, of course civil aircrafts, numerous, but military aircrafts to land and to use the facilities of Plaisance Airport, which have been granted on, I can quote, in fact, I have a list of all of them from countries like French military aircrafts. Since 2014 to 2020, we have had 96 military aircrafts landing and using our facilities. From that same period, Indian Air Force, we have had 10. And there are US military aircrafts and so on. So it's not as if there is something which is new, exceptional, abnormal, which is happening.
Time over by 3 minutes. Next item.
Private member's motion.
Honourable Ito.
Merci. Monsieur le Président, à l'instant que je m'adresse à vous, et je le redis, 7 mois après ma dernière intervention sur ce Private Members Motion de décembre 2021, l'homme le plus riche dans le monde est toujours nul autre qu'un fabricant de voitures électriques avec une fortune estimée à 244 milliards de dollars. Pendant plus de 20 ans, les plus riches hommes, femmes et listed companies évoluaient dans le monde de l'informatique ou des services en ligne. Des entrepreneurs ayant fait fortune en profitant de la Third Industrial Revolution, notamment la révolution digitale des années 90-2000. En même temps, Monsieur le Président, une autre réalité qu'on ne peut rester insensible ou indifférent est que la majorité des grands fabricants de voitures traditionnelles, dites Internal Combustion Engine, se sont engagés à arrêter la production de voitures roulant à essence ou diesel d'ici 2030, voire 2035. Et ils fabriqueront uniquement des voitures électriques, peut-être même avant la date butoir. Tout cela, Monsieur le Président, pour venir vous dire qu'il est temps que nous pensons, que nous parlons sérieusement d'une transition à l'électrique plus verte dans l'environnement automobile mauricien. Mr. Speaker, sir, despite supply constraints and COVID-19, there are actually almost 20 million passenger vehicles, electric vehicles on the road, 1.3 million commercial electric vehicles, including buses, delivery trucks, vans, and over 280 million electric mopeds, scooters and motorcycles, and this is from the Electric Vehicle Outlook 2022 on Bloomberg. We are in the middle of the biggest revolution in motoring since Henry Ford's first line of production started in 1913. And it is likely to happen much more quickly than any of us here can imagine. Mr. Speaker, sir, many industry observers believe that we have already passed the tipping point where sales of electric vehicles will rapidly overwhelm petrol and diesel cars. It is certainly what the world's biggest car manufacturers think. Yes, the fact that many governments around the world are setting targets to ban the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles gives impetus to the process. And yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, ban on the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles, the European Union Commission last year proposed to reduce to 100% CO2 emissions from new cars by 2035, making it impossible to sell fossil fuel-powered vehicles in the European Union from that date, 2035. The European Union insists that 2035 target is crucial. And this is because the average lifespan of new cars is 15 years. And its ambition to reach net zero emissions by 2050 depends on that. And 2050, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the global milestone scientists believe we should not trespass in order to escape disastrous climate change. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not chaos that we would want to leave to our children and the children of our children. I would like here to thank my colleague, Honorable Tu, for coming up with this private member's motion, which gives us a moment to ponder on what actions have been taken and what actions can be taken for a better future for our country. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, most importantly, creating and leaving a legacy. En parlant de legacy, ici, Monsieur le Président, comme jeune parlementaire, je me suis intéressé à la classe politicienne dans l'histoire de notre pays et leur contribution jusqu'à Maurice 2022. What's the legacy left by our political leaders? We've known independence under late Sir Sagar Ramgoolam. On a connu la lutte syndicale menée par l'honorable Béranger dans les années 90. On a connu le fameux miracle économique sous feu Sir Anirudh Jagannath dans les années 80, qui en alliance avec feu Sir Gaëtan Duval nous a légué le tourisme. Feu Sir Anirudh Jagannath reviendra pour jeter les bases pour une île Maurice intelligente avec la cybercité à Eben. On se rappelle bien comment certains pleuraient les quelques arpents sous culture de canne à sucre à l'époque en disant éléphant blanc. On a connu, sous l'honorable Premier ministre Pravin Jagannath, le projet métro qui a été discuté, rediscuté et rediscuté depuis les années 90. Et Monsieur le Président, comme jeune parlementaire, ce qui m'impressionne le plus, c'est le travail abattu par ces leaders politiques, actuels et anciens premiers ministres, qui ont travaillé pour l'unité de ce peuple dans la diversité. Et cela, je dois le préciser, tout en respectant chaque religion. L'île Maurice, dans son ensemble, leur sera toujours reconnaissante, parce que le secret de notre succès réside dans notre stabilité sociale, économique et politique. À bon entendeur, salut. Monsieur le Président, pendant son oratoire, l'honorable Ousmane Mohamed nous a martelé avec son pseudo-legacy à la commission Maurice-Île durable, créée en 2008. Par contre, en 2014, voilà ce que disait un porte-parole de la plateforme citoyenne. Et je quote, « Tout est resté au stade des déclarations. Le projet Maurice-Île durable semble se tourner majoritairement vers les solutions de maîtrise énergétique pour les foyers. » Un célèbre océanographe lui disait des louables intentions restées au stade de projet. Le projet Maurice-Île durable est resté une chimère. Personne n'y a vraiment adhéré. Mais, Monsieur le Président, le vrai legacy qu'ils voulaient nous léguer, c'est leur centrale à charbon qui leur était si chère. Mr. Speaker, sir, on this side of the House, we are serious and we will remain consistent in our thought, words and action. Mr. Speaker, sir, what makes the end of the internal combustion engine inevitable is technological revolution. And technological revolutions tend to happen very quickly. I believe there is a revolution coming, and the revolution will be electric. For instance, let's look at the internet. By my reckoning, the electric vehicle market is about where the internet was around in the late 1990s and early 2000. Back then, there was a big buzz about this new thing with computers talking to each other. Jeff Bezos had set up Amazon, and Google was beginning to take over the likes of Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves, and Yahoo. Some of the companies involved had racked up eye-popping valuations, and for those who hadn't yet logged on it, all seemed exciting but irrelevant. For them, it was how useful could communicating by computers be, And they were saying, after all, we've got phones. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the internet, like all successful new technologies, did not follow a linear path to world domination. It didn't gradually evolve, giving us time to plan ahead. Its growth was explosive, disruptive, crushing existing businesses and changing the way we do almost everything. And it followed a familiar pattern known by technologists as the S-curve. The idea that innovation starts slowly, they are of interest to only the nerdiest of the nerds. Electric vehicles is on the shallow, sloping bottom of that S here. For the internet, the graph started at 2230 on the 29th October 1969, when a computer in California made contact with another computer in Stanford University a few hundred miles away. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is clear that the electric revolution will come and change our lives as fast as the digital revolution. Mr. Speaker, sir, in his intervention, Honorable Mohammed told us that electric cars are very expensive, and for a country like Mauritius, which is now in a difficult economic situation, making the use of electric cars will have a huge impact on our import bill. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that was only 7 months ago. What we've seen in the meantime is massive improvements in motors that drive electric vehicles, the computers that control them, charging systems, and car design. But the sea change in performance that users have experienced is largely possible because of the improvement in the non-beating heart of the electric vehicle, and that is the battery. The most striking change is in prices. Just a decade ago, it cost around $1,000 per kilowatt hour of battery power. Now it is a nudging $100. That is reckoned to be the point at which electric vehicles start to become cheaper to buy than equivalent internal combustion engines. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you factor in the cost of fuel and servicing, electric vehicles need much less of that. And many electric vehicles are already cheaper than their petrol or diesel alternative. At the same time, energy density, that is how much power you can pack in each battery, continues to rise. And they are lasting longer as well. Mr. Speaker, sir, last year the world's first battery capable of powering a car for 1 million miles was unveiled by Chinese battery car maker called CATL. Companies that run big fleets of cars like Uber and Lyft are leading the switch over because the savings are greatest for cars with high mileage. Today, the question is not whether consumers will adopt electric vehicles, but actually how fast it will happen. For me, the answer is very fast. Like the internet in the 1990s, the electric car market is already growing exponentially. Global sales of electric cars raced forward in 2030, rise by 43% to a total of 3.2 million, despite overall car sales slumping by 1/5 during the coronavirus pandemic. That is just 5% of total car sales, but it shows we are already entering the steep part of the S. By 2025, Mr. Speaker, sir, 20% of all new cars sold globally will be electric, according to the latest forecast by investment bank UBS. That will leap to 40% by 2030, and by 2040, virtually every new car sold globally will be electric. The reason is thanks to another curve, what the manufacturers call the learning curve. And I will tell my honorable friend Osman Mohamed, the more we make something, the better we get at making it, and the cheaper it gets to make. That's why PCs kitchen appliances, and yes, petrol and diesel cars became so affordable. The same thing is what has been driving down the price of batteries and hence electric cars. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are on the verge of a tipping point, says Ramez Nam, co-chair of Energy and Environment at the University of California. He believes as soon as electric vehicles become cost competitive with fossil fuel vehicles, the game will be up. That's certainly what Tesla's self-styled techno-king Elon Musk believes. Last month, he was telling investors that the Model 3 has become the best-selling premium sedan in the world, and he's predicting that the newer, cheaper Model Y would become the best-selling car of any kind. And I quote, he says, we've seen a real shift in customer perception of electric vehicles, and our demand is the best we've ever seen. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is work to be done before electric vehicles drive their petrol and diesel rivals off the road. Most importantly, everyone needs to be able to charge their cars easily and cheaply, whether or not they have a driveway at their home. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that will take a lot of work, investment, but will happen, just as a vast network of petrol stations rapidly sprang up to fuel cars a century ago. Even Dr. Fatih Birol, director of International Energy Agency, said it, and I quote, while they can't do the job alone, electric vehicles have an indispensable role to play in reaching net zero emissions worldwide. End of quote. Monsieur le Président, ma collègue l'honorable Tour nous a donné les chiffres représentant les émissions de CO2 émanant de notre parc automobile local, roulant à essence et diesel. Les chiffres, malheureusement, parlent d'elles-mêmes. Le marché de véhicules électriques semble enfin se lancer à Maurice, lentement, mais sûrement, et cela ne fait que quelques années. Monsieur le Président, selon l'étude de Entreprises et Mobilité de l'agence Alphabet en Europe, 3 personnes sur 4 utilisent une voiture pour se rendre au travail ou pour faire des déplacements professionnels. Une étude sur le comportement des utilisateurs explique que 51% des utilisateurs utilisent leur véhicule par obligation, 33,3% par souci de bien-être et 15,7% pour des raisons économiques. L'intérêt croissant pour la technologie des véhicules électriques repose sur une combinaison d'intérêts environnementaux, sociopolitiques et économiques. Ces 3 facteurs, Monsieur le Président, suscitent un important soutien en faveur de l'adoption de véhicules électriques auprès du gouvernement, de nombreux pays qui ont mis en place des politiques incitant à l'adoption des véhicules électriques. Par exemple, Monsieur le Président, la France a annoncé son intention d'interdire la vente de véhicules fonctionnant au gaz conventionnel et au diesel au cours de 2-3 prochaines décennies. Aujourd'hui, tous les constructeurs automobiles se lancent dans la construction de voitures électriques. D'ici 2025, comme je l'ai dit, ils représenteront 30% des ventes de voitures. C'est un fait, la voiture électrique se trouve au cœur de la stratégie de décarbonation de plusieurs pays. Et cela, Monsieur le Président, devrait inclure Maurice. Elle apparaît comme une solution pour un avenir plus propre, plus respectueux de l'environnement et la santé, générant moins de pollution atmosphérique et de nuisances sonores. Donc, se déplacer grâce à une voiture électrique peut avoir un impact important dans la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique. De plus, Monsieur le Président, on constate une rapide baisse des prix à l'achat des voitures électriques, boostée notamment par les différents incentives gouvernementaux et le fait que le coût de l'énergie est moins important que le diesel et l'essence. Une solution écologique et économique, me direz-vous, Monsieur le Président. Il ne faudra plus longtemps avant que les voitures électriques deviennent accessibles à tout le monde. On ne peut qu'entrevoir les innovations du futur et toutes les objections pourront progressivement être écartés. Mr. Speaker, sir, there were 10 million electric cars on the world's road at the end of 2020, following a decade of rapid growth. Electric car registrations increased by 41% in 2020, despite the pandemic-related worldwide downturn in car sales, in which global sales dropped 16%. Around 3 million electric cars were sold globally, a 4.6% sales share, and Europe overtook the People's Republic of China as the world's largest electric vehicle market for the first time. Electric bus and truck registrations also expanded in major markets, reaching global stocks of around 600,000 and 31,000 respectively. The resilience of electric vehicle sales in the face of the pandemic rests on 3 pillars: supportive regulatory frameworks. Even before the pandemic, many countries were strengthening key policies such as CO2 emission standards, zero-emission vehicle mandates, and by the end of 2020, more than 20 countries had announced bans on the sale of conventional cars or mandated all new sales to be ZEVs, that is zero-emission vehicles. Second, additional incentives to safeguard electric vehicle sales from the economic downturn. Mr. Speaker, sir, some European countries increased their purchase incentives, and China delayed the phase-out of its subsidy scheme. And the number of electric vehicles expanded, and the battery cost continued to fall. Mr. Speaker, sir, vehicle manufacturers announced increasingly ambitious electrification plans. Out of the world's top 20 vehicle manufacturers, which represented around 90% of new car registrations in 2020, 18 out of these 20, Mr. Speaker, sir, 18 have stated plans to widen their portfolio of models and to rapidly scale up the production of light-duty electric vehicles. The model availability of electric heavy-duty vehicles is also broadening, with 4 major truck manufacturers indicating an all-electric future. Consumer spending on electric car purchases increased to $120 billion in 2020. In parallel, Mr. Speaker, sir, across the world, governments spent $14 billion to support electric car sales, up 25% from 2019, and that is mostly stronger incentives in Europe. Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, sir, the share of government incentives in total spending on electric cars has decreased over the past 5 years, suggesting that electric vehicles are becoming increasingly attractive to consumers. The near-term outlook for electric vehicle sales is bright. In the first quarter of 2021, global electric car sales rose by around 140% compared to the same period in 2020. Driven by sales in China of around 500,000 vehicles and in Europe 450,000 vehicles. US sales has more than doubled relative to the first quarter of 2020, albeit from a much lower base. Mr. Speaker, sir, strong momentum in electric vehicle markets despite the pandemic. We have seen, strong momentum in electric vehicle markets despite the pandemic. Existing policies around the world suggest healthy growth over this decade. In the stated policies scenario, the electric vehicle stock across all modes, except, Mr. Speaker, sir, 2 three-wheelers, which reaches 145 million in 2030, accounting for 7% of the road vehicle fleet. Electric vehicle markets could be significantly larger if governments accelerate efforts to reach climate goals. In the Sustainable Development scenario, the global electric vehicle fleet reaches 230 million in 2030. The expanding fleet of electric vehicles will continue to reduce well-to-wheel GHG emissions with the net savings relative to internal combustion engines vehicles, increasingly over time depending on the pace at which electricity generation decarbonizes. In 2030, in the stated policy scenario, again, the global electric vehicle fleet reduces GHG emissions by more than 1/3, compared to an equivalent high internal combustion engine vehicle fleet. In the sustainable development scenario, the level rises to 2/3. Electric vehicles are set to be a more common sight on the world's roads in the 2020s. Even with recent success of electric vehicle deployment, reaching a trajectory consistent with climate goals, even within the recent success of electric vehicle deployment, reaching a trajectory consistent with climate goals is a formidable challenge. It requires stronger ambition and action from all countries, and that includes Mauritius. Advances in battery technology and mass manufacturing will continue to drive down the cost of EVs. But the 2020s will need to see more than just mass adoption of electric light-duty vehicles to meet climate goals. Governments, Mauritian government as well, will also need to put in place policies to promote the rollout of zero-emission vehicles in the medium and heavy-duty vehicle segments, and the corresponding fast-charging infrastructure. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, fast-charging infrastructure. À ce titre, Monsieur le Président, c'est avec beaucoup de plaisir que je note l'inauguration de 2 bornes de chargement solaire de 7,4 kW hier, pas plus tard que hier, par le groupe Lille. Et je reprends ce qui a été dit par le concessionnaire local, les véhicules électriques sont la solution du futur. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the short term, countries can continue to implement, enforce, and tighten measures such as CO2 and fuel economy standards and electric vehicle mandates. Taxing gasoline and diesel at rates that reflect their environmental and human health impacts can provide government revenue, reduce their negative impacts, and hasten the transition to electric mobility. Differentiated taxation of vehicle and fuel that reflect their environmental performance can further align markets with the climate benefits of electric vehicles. In order for electric vehicles to attain their full potential to mitigate carbon emissions, critical progress is required to decarbonize electricity generation, to integrate electric vehicles in power system, to build charging infrastructure, and to advance sustainable battery manufacturing and their recycling. Mr. Speaker, sir, policies need to leverage momentum to further accelerate electrification. Monsieur le Président, les voitures électriques sont de plus en plus utilisées tout autour du monde et selon l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, il devrait y en avoir plus de 300 millions en circulation après 2040. Sur la voie de l'électrification, la compagnie UPS vient d'annoncer un partenariat avec Workforce pour la construction de 35 000 fourgons électriques pour étoffer sa flotte de véhicules de livraison, car dorénavant, il est de plus en plus facile de recharger ce genre de véhicules. La problématique, Monsieur le Président, de la recharge est primordiale, car à l'heure actuelle, le pétrole utilisé par les moyens de transport, 95% d'essence, de diesel et de kérosène, représente un tiers de nos ressources primaires. Monsieur le Président, le seul moyen de réduire clairement la consommation de pétrole est de remplacer les véhicules à moteur à combustion par des moteurs électriques, sans quoi il sera impossible de contrer les effets les plus néfastes du changement climatique. Mais ces véhicules électriques doivent être alimentés par une énergie propre, c'est-à-dire qui n'est pas produite à l'aide de ressources fossiles, sinon ils seront tout aussi polluants que les véhicules conditionnels. Cela a été dit par l'honorable Tour et l'honorable Ousmane Mohamed, et je suis d'accord. Aujourd'hui, il y a plus d'1 milliard de véhicules à combustion interne en circulation dans le monde, et 100 millions supplémentaires seront produits chaque année. Monsieur le Président, nous en compterons donc plus de 2 milliards en 2040, surtout si les inégalités énergétiques mondiales se réduisent, alors que 90% des voitures devraient être électriques si nous souhaitons diminuer les émissions de CO2 du secteur des transports. Donc, Monsieur le Président, 300 millions de véhicules électriques, ça ne suffira pas à inverser la tendance, malheureusement. Monsieur le Président, de nombreux pays se sont déterminés à interdire les véhicules dotés de moteurs à combustion interne, notamment l'Angleterre, l'Allemagne, la France, la Norvège, même la Chine. Cette dernière est le pays le plus important car il a besoin de plus de voitures et il fabrique plus de voitures électriques que les autres pays mis bout à bout. La Norvège, Monsieur le Président, et on y reviendra sur la Norvège, affirme qu'elle interdira la vente de véhicules consommant des combustibles fossiles en 2025. Dans 4 ans, Monsieur le Président, je vais dire dans 3 ans, alors que les autres gouvernements visent 2040. C'est très bien, mais c'est peu probable étant donné les limites de la croissance de la production de véhicules électriques, la nécessité de meilleures batteries et le prix du lithium qui s'envole depuis quelques années. Monsieur le Président, par ailleurs, les voitures électriques sont plus faciles à fabriquer et à entretenir. Je l'ai dit, ces dernières ne comptent qu'une vingtaine de pièces mobiles contre 2000 pour les véhicules classiques. Selon les chercheurs James Arbib et Tony Seba, les voitures électriques peuvent faire plus de 300 000 km en ne changeant que les pneus. Par exemple, une Tesla S a fait plus de 800 000 km avec la même batterie. Et Monsieur le Président, à ce titre, je note avec satisfaction l'inauguration en décembre d'une deuxième batch de 14 MW, un système de batterie BESS, Grid Scale Battery Energy Storage System, et je félicite d'ailleurs le ministre des Utilités publiques, l'honorable Légion-Gord, et lui et son équipe, et la CEB, pour arriver à ce milestone important dans notre transition énergétique. Et j'apprends, Monsieur le Président, avec beaucoup de plaisir, l'achat et l'installation d'un système de batterie additionnel de 22 MW pour très bientôt. Cela démontre, Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, comment le sérieux de ce gouvernement pour un développement durable, tout en respectant ses engagements. Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID-19 has effectively impacted our everyday life, businesses, and the way we think about the future. Likewise, COVID-19 has affected almost all aspects of transportation. For the public sector, economic shutdowns have gutted the tax revenue needed to buy and maintain government vehicle fleets. Perhaps no municipal entity has been hit harder than public transport agencies, which have seen ridership plummet by up to 97%. Some transit operators are close to bankruptcy, while some bus services may face permanent closure. For the private sector, Mr. Speaker, sir, COVID-19 has increased interest in the private vehicle use as consumers feel safer and more protected from the virus in cars than they do in public transit. And Mr. Speaker, sir, not only are people grabbing their keys instead of transit passes, but those who never had keys to begin with are now considering a vehicle purchase. I'm talking here about the trend in Europe, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are troubling trends that threaten the fundamental tenets of sustainable mobility. Improved mass transit and reduced private vehicle use, public transportation is fundamental for creating efficient and sustainable cities, and cities should continue to prioritize public transit over private vehicles. Mr. Speaker, sir, however, private vehicles are unlikely to ever disappear, and those which are purchased should be electric. Through the right policies and investments, local governments can encourage consumers to make the right choice while also expanding their own electric vehicle fleets and growing their economies. Mr. Speaker, sir, 4 reasons to invest in an electric vehicle now, given the issues posed by COVID-19. Now is the perfect time for vehicle owners and operators to invest in electric vehicles, especially electric buses. Accelerated electric vehicle adoption during the pandemic will spur the economy. The International Labour Organization estimates more than 14 million workers have been adversely affected by the pandemic, just in the United States and Europe. Procuring more electric vehicles and building infrastructure can immediately create jobs and spur sustained economic activity. The United States alone is projected to need 330,000 public charging outlets and a total of roughly $4.7 billion in electric vehicle infrastructure investment by 2025. Although job growth will likely come from sectors outside the rapidly automating vehicle manufacturing sector, several studies conclude that electric vehicles will provide a net benefit to total job growth, with estimates noting up to 2 million new jobs by 2030 in the charging and maintenance sectors and elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is no better investment to spur economic activity than one that requires large upfront investment and provides long-term cost savings. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, sir, is save money. Despite their large upfront costs, electric vehicles can have a cheaper total cost of ownership and save money in the long term. One recent study showed that the ownership cost of e-taxis will be less than conventional taxis after as little as 4 years' use. Bloomberg estimated that e-buses started to produce a lower cost of ownership than diesel buses by 2018, assuming that the bus drives at least 160 kilometers a day. These cost savings can help governments and companies build their emergency funds and weather operational deficits during times of crisis or low demand. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, sir, create new revenue streams in emergencies and times of low demand. There are additional uses and revenue streams associated with electric vehicles, especially those with big batteries such as buses, delivery vehicles, and municipal trucks. In times of crisis or low demand, heavy-duty electric vehicles, or an aggregated network of smaller batteries can be used to provide stable electricity to hospitals and other essential services through vehicle-to-grid solutions. This is the future, Mr. Speaker, sir. For example, in Virginia, Dominion Energy expects to replace 50 diesel buses with electric vehicles by end of 2020, extending to more than 1,000 vehicles by 2025, with state approval. When the plan is fully implemented, the batteries in the bus fleet could store up to 105 megawatt hours of electricity, enough to power more than 10,000 homes. This builds on a pilot project led by the University of Delaware, where electric cars ended up generating more than $1,000 per car per month. Mr. Speaker, sir, number 4, retain local air quality improvements. Mr. Speaker, sir, over the course of the COVID-19 shutdown, air pollution dropped by almost 60% in many cities. Electric vehicles have no tailpipe emissions, emit less heat, and produce less noise compared to conventional vehicles. Prioritizing electric vehicle adoption now would help retain air quality improvements and lower health risks in communities. Mr. Speaker, sir, these benefits can be further improved by using electric vehicles to improve renewable energy integration. For example, solar energy produced during the daytime can be used in electric vehicles and used later by selling it back to the grid. Mr. Speaker, sir, how can governments support more electric vehicles? Obviously, electric vehicles, especially large shared electric vehicles such as buses, are a great way to push the economy forward in the wake of COVID-19. While the approach may differ by region, there are three main steps that governments can take to support both public and private electric vehicle deployment. Number one, grow charging infrastructure. Lack of charging infrastructure is a key barrier to scale electric vehicles. Accelerating its deployment not only provides confidence to consumers in overcoming perceived range anxiety, it also creates the essential infrastructure linkage with the electricity grid. Smart charging infrastructure will also help in managing the electric load on the grid and use electric vehicles as energy storage resources. By focusing on the widespread deployment of public charging infrastructure and incentivizing workplace charging, this investment, Mr. Speaker, sir, will have sustained positive outcomes. Number two, support electric vehicle purchases in COVID-19 relief packages. Whether from national governments or from international institutions, many cities and countries will likely be eligible for post-COVID-19 stimulus in the months to come, in the years to come. Governments should prioritize these funds towards actions which will create cascading economic growth in the short term, save money in the long term, and provide environmental co-benefits. Mr. Speaker, sir, purchasing electric vehicles, especially buses and other high-mileage shared vehicles, is one concrete way to achieve all these three goals. Mr. Speaker, sir, policymakers should craft stimulus packages that subsidize the purchase of electric vehicles and their corresponding charging infrastructure, such as Germany's 15 billion euro stimulus package. This package aims to accelerate electric vehicle adoption by increasing subsidies on vehicle purchase, lowering taxes, and scaling charging infrastructure. Number three, Mr. Speaker, sir, implement emission standards and electric vehicle mandates. Mr. Speaker, sir, to assist the efforts to develop charging infrastructure and structure stimulus packages, policymakers should also put in place laws to solidify the long-term push to electrification. Worldwide, vehicle standards and mandates have proven to be effective policy tools to mitigate greenhouse gases for the transport sector and support electric vehicle adoption and migration. For example, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Mexico, a vehicle efficiency standard reduced carbon dioxide emissions by an estimated 30 million tons from 2013 to 2017, improved the overall efficiency of the country's vehicles by close to 11%, and set the stage for future electric vehicle adoption. Mr. Speaker, sir, zero-emission vehicle mandates have also proven effective in increasing electric vehicle purchases, as evident by successful programs in California and China. Such policies spur supply chains for clean vehicles and can bolster charging infrastructure plans and stimulus money, dramatically hastening the pace towards electrifying vehicle fleets. Mr. Speaker, sir, building back with better electric vehicles. Electric vehicles can help a more environmentally and financially sustainable post-COVID-19 world. Despite the destructive and painful nature of the pandemic, it also offers a once-in-a-century opportunity to pause business-as-usual vehicle production and shift towards a clean, economical, and electric future. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we talk of electric vehicles, we often think of only cars. Another segment where carbon emissions can be significantly reduced is that of micro-mobility industry. Those lightweight vehicles such as bikes, bicycles, mopeds, electric scooters, and why not trottinettes. And Mr. Speaker, sir, electric micro-mobility surged in the second half of 2020 one of the consumer trends that accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic, further boosted by the construction of bike lanes and other measures to promote mobility. Sales of private e-bikes in the United States, Mr. Speaker, Sir, more than doubled in 2020, outpacing sales of all bikes, which were up an already healthy 65%. Mr. Speaker, Sir, many shared micro-mobility operators reduced or suspended services during the height of the second quarter of 2020, COVID-19 lockdowns. But as confinements were eased, services rebounded strongly, with 270 cities worldwide relaunching operations. As of February 2021, around 650 cities have shared micro-mobility services. In Europe, e-scooter services have increased rapidly, with more than 100 cities adding operations since July 2020. Mr. Speaker, Sir, preliminary data from operators indicate average trip distances on e-scooters have increased by around 25% relative to before the pandemic. Operators are increasingly offering more powerful e-bikes with plans to expand into electric mopeds, which could further displace longer trips currently completed by car or public transit. Mr. Speaker, Sir, several major operators are introducing swappable batteries to improve operational efficiency and reduce emissions. Although the use of swappable batteries increase the number of total batteries needed to support a fleet, it can significantly reduce operational emissions and enable longer lifetime of vehicles. Mr. Speaker, Sir, privately owned electric two-free-wheelers, which includes motorized vehicles such as motorcycles, mopeds, are concentrated in Asia, with China accounting for around 99% registration. The global stock of electric two-free-wheelers is now around 290 million. And electric two-free-wheelers account for 1/3 of all two-free-wheeler sales. Mr. Speaker, Sir, while current sales are dominated by Asia, the market is growing rapidly, and in Europe, rising by 30% in 2020, benefiting from a wider model availability and continued incentives. Mr. Speaker, Sir, by reducing the consumption of oil products, electric vehicle uptake lessens the amount of revenue that governments derive from fossil fuel taxes. This is the truth, which is not fully compensated by the levies on the increased electricity use. The net tax loss is mainly due to lower overall energy consumption. EVs are 2 to 4 times more efficient than a comparable internal combustion engine vehicles, rather than different taxation levels of electricity or oil products. Mr. Speaker, Sir, while this effect on government tax take is limited today, by 2030, the global electric vehicle fleet might imply a net fuel tax loss of around $40 billion in the stated policy scenario and $55 billion in the sustainable development scenario. And Mr. Speaker, Sir, governments should anticipate this trend and design mechanisms that enable continued support for electric vehicles deployment, while at the same time limit their revenue impact. In the short term, Mr. Speaker, Sir, existing taxation schemes should flexibly adapt to changes in the fuel market. For instance, taxes on oil products should adapt to maintain the overall revenue from fuel taxation, despite a net decline in use. However, these short-term measures cannot be protracted in time, as they risk creating distortions and, of course, raising equity issues. Mr. Speaker, Sir, in the long term, the stabilization of tax revenue, important to support investment in roads and other transport infrastructure, is likely to require deeper reforms in tax schemes. Mr. Speaker, Sir, These could include coupling higher taxes on carbon-intensive fuels with distance-based charges. Mr. Speaker, sir, however, it is also important to note that widespread electric vehicle adoption will reduce air pollution, offsetting lost tax revenue by reducing health damages and their associated costs. Mr. Speaker, sir, measures are needed to balance reduced revenue from fuel taxes associated with electric vehicle uptake. Mr. Speaker, sir, the one nation that stands out when it comes to electric vehicle adoption is Norway. And it is important we talk about it, because it is by no coincidence that Norway leads the world in electric vehicle penetration. The shift didn't happen overnight, but the speed of transition here has surprised everyone. Almost 65% of new passenger cars sold in Norway in 2021 were electric. In addition, Mr. Speaker, sir, 22% were plug-in hybrids. Put differently, only 14% of new cars were sold without a plug in Norway lately. Now that there are many models to choose from and the range has improved, electric vehicles are purchased all over the country. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it took them only 10 years to move from 1% to 65%, and next year it is believed they will go to 80%. The US and other governments should use and Mauritius should use 2022 to enact policies that incentivize a similar shift. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, how did Norway become the world's top-selling electric vehicle market per capita? Not only because of suitable conditions, but definitely not because of suitable conditions, definitely not because Norwegians are more environmentally friendly or concerned about climate change than the rest of the world or than us. We can instead credit strong demand-side policies kept in place for a long time. After all, it takes time to electrify all the cars on the road. Mr. Speaker, sir, most cars are purchased second-hand, and people in the second-hand market are dependent on the choices made by new car buyers. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the government therefore the government in Norway taxes the sales of new polluting cars heavily, but does not tax electric vehicles at all, making electric vehicles, which are more expensive because of their production costs, and I have said electric cars, the cost is going to be almost the same very shortly, a competitive and more appealing option. And here, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to thank the Honourable Minister of Finance, Honourable Pareachi, for removing all duties on all electric cars and hybrid vehicles in his last budget exercise. The Norwegian Parliament has also decided that all sales of new cars and vans shall be zero emission by 2025. The faster we get to 100% electric vehicle new sale, the faster we get there with all cars on the road. Et, Monsieur le Président, petite précision que je voudrais ajouter, on a entendu souvent parler du oil curse, martelé par certains. Eh bien, vous serez surpris de savoir que la Norvège est une nation verte bâtie sur le pétrole. Avec ses immenses réserves de gaz naturel et de pétrole, son energy mix comprend 90% d'énergie verte renouvelable et la Norvège reste un pays les plus riches d'Europe. And Mr. Speaker, sir, how they did it, government policy has been key. The speed of the transition correlates closely with government policy and incentives for purchasers. In Norway, the secret to accelerate uptake of electric vehicles is to make them cheap enough. Norway lowered the taxes in electric vehicles to keep the price down, and even exempted road tolls as an extra incentive. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, has already been implemented to a certain extent in Mauritius, like I said. Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposite approach was to raise taxes on traditional cars, a kind of pollution tax. In Norway, this included a 25% VAT tax, a carbon tax close to 20%, and smaller amounts for weight tax and a car scrapping fee. Driving distances are relatively short in Norway, and this is an advantage for electric vehicles, which could also be the case for Mauritius. Second reason, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a supply of renewable electricity. Norway's energy mix consists mainly of renewable sources. Mauritius' ambitions to produce 60% of its energy needs from renewable sources by 2030. Norway's advantage are electricity which is already decarbonized, beneficial national policy providing incentive to electric vehicle buyers, and the Norwegian government came up with a series of electric vehicle incentives. Some of them which I would like to share with you, Mr. Speaker, sir. No purchase or import taxes on electric vehicle since the 1990s. Exemption from 25% VAT on purchase since 2001. No annual road tax since 1966. Since 1996 until last year, it is a reduced road tax from 2021. No charges on toll roads or ferries from 1997 to 2017. Free municipal parking, access to bus lanes, new rules allowing local authorities to limit the access to only include electric vehicles that carry one or more passengers, 50% reduced company car tax, exemption from 25% VAT on leasing, fiscal compensation for the scrapping of fossil vans when converting to a zero-emission van. This is what we are seeing in Norway. And what are we seeing in other parts of the world? The European Union is negotiating another law, yet another law requiring countries in the European Union to install millions of vehicle chargers this decade. And in the US, it has already started. President Biden's infrastructure bill includes $7.5 billion for a nationwide charging network. But the US can go further in 2022 and as can other countries and implement policies and directed at the demand side. Mr. Speaker, sir, this can be done in different ways. The key is to start taxing new sales of at least the most polluting car models and use this money to subsidize electric vehicles. This is a fair way to implement climate policies as it is aimed at people buying a new car rather than an indiscriminate tax at the gas pump. Mr. Speaker, sir, consumers are given an option when buying a new car. They could, for instance, choose a model with lower emissions like a plug-in hybrid, which is not taxed, or even an electrical vehicle which is subsidized. To be clear, tax policies on purchase alone won't get there. We need to be forced enough. In Norway, for example, there are also several incentives in place which I have already gone through. Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, the transition to electric vehicle might be more politically difficult in some countries than others. But several countries like Sweden and New Zealand have already started with good results after implementing electric vehicle tax policies. And Mr. Speaker, sir, new markets are also helped with better technology and massive investment in electric mobility. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, some countries are moving even faster than Norway. While Norway took 2.5 years to move from 2% to 10% electric vehicle share, UK took 1.5 years, and Germany only 1. 2022 is also the year that all governments should join the first 38 countries that signed the COP26 Declaration on Accelerating Transition to 100% Zero Emission on Cars and Vans. It says that they will work toward the sales of new cars and vans being zero emission globally by 2040 and no later than 2025 in leading markets. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mauritius has a history of being an avant-garde nation in the sub-Saharan African region by daring early ventures in fields like high-quality textiles, tourism, offshore banking, ICT, and now advanced biopharmaceutical manufacturing, which resulted to the unimaginable success of our small island. Mr. Speaker, sir, the new emerging electric vehicle industry is, in my humble opinion, the next wave, not to miss, to the next phase of our development. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are not only talking here of cars, but intelligent software-controlled cars with artificial technology, with research ongoing for autonomous capabilities in the near future. Mr. Speaker, sir, for example, Apple new car chief, Kevin Lynch, is pushing to launch fully self-driving electric cars only 4 years from now. Autonomous electric vehicles use artificial intelligence, next-generation batteries, and other fourth industrial revolution technologies, and could transport passengers more efficiently without the need for drivers or fossil fuel-driven internal combustion engines. Mr. Speaker, sir, given the advantages of cleaner and quicker transport, AEVs, artificial intelligence electric vehicles, could potentially accelerate much-needed greenhouse emission reductions in the transport sector. Our Low Carbon Economy Index 2017 highlights the considerable gap between current decarbonization efforts and the Paris Agreement's goal to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. Mr. Speaker, sir, this transition gap emphasizes the need for immediate action and indicates a number of risks and opportunities for businesses. And Mr. Speaker, sir, these include market, technology, and policy disruptions that could bridge the gap to 2 degrees, but present substantial risks to a number of sectors. AEV technology is one example of such disruption. Mr. Speaker, sir, what can governments do to boost their country's rates of electric vehicle adoption? Norway's Climate and Environment Minister, Sven Rotenvan, has been very blunt about it. It's all about the convergence of better vehicle performance and lower prices. Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, money talks. And I don't think you can reasonably expect people to sacrifice their family's economy to save the environment. People do want to make an effort for the environment, but your wallet, and most aren't willing to spend. Most are not willing to spend 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 euros extra on buying a car. That's the simple truth, says Mr. Sven Stendam. Monsieur le Président, si un environnementaliste, un écolo, un activiste vert achète une voiture électrique, il n'y a rien d'impressionnant. Mais quand des gens qui ne croient pas dans le changement climatique achètent des véhicules électriques, cela demande à être célébré. Et c'est là la seule façon de ralentir le réchauffement planétaire, de le rendre profitable aux consommateurs. And government has a key role to play here. My point here, Mr. Speaker, sir, is as evolving technologies shape the world with the Internet of Things, blockchain, cloud computing, data analytics, and artificial intelligence, Mauritius has been active in setting the pace in the African region, having even been ranked a leader in Africa in the ICT sector. As we ambition to strengthen and broaden ICT as a pillar of our economy, we are condemned. Yes, Mr. Speaker, so we are condemned to be first movers in adopting and vulgarizing technologies of the future. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, sir, this will not only place Mauritius in a better position from any arising business and commercial opportunities for the region, but also prospect the highly qualified. The electric vehicle industry comes with a lot of opportunities. These are not only restricted to manufacturing of electric cars. Yes, we have missed the manufacturing of conventional cars, the potential for the industry of manufacturing of conventional cars in Mauritius. But building electric cars is another industry we could target. Other business opportunities, Mr. Speaker, sir, infrastructure design and setup that includes charging stations, software development, training and skill development, retrofitting, fleet operation, dealership and franchise, maintenance and repair. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are all opportunities that will arise, new opportunities that will arise with the electric vehicle industry. The IEEE report suggests that it also remains to be seen whether a compelling case for the electric vehicles can be made to customers still worried about cost, range and recharging infrastructure, not to mention their hesitancy to spend much for autonomous driving capabilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, government investments and incentives like those proposed by Biden administration, or in China, or in the European Union, or even in Russia, may help overcome some of these concerns. And if the electric vehicle market grows slower than predicted or hoped for, there may be a lot of lost bets. Mr. Speaker, sir, paradoxically, if the electric vehicle market grows faster than predicted, electric vehicle laggards could be wiped out. Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot afford to be a laggard in that race. Monsieur le Président, nous avons déjà notre 10-year Electric Vehicle Integration Roadmap depuis 2020 et je dois admettre qu'il a fait un travail formidable en identifiant le contexte local, technologique, les challenges et en proposant des scénarios de transition. Monsieur le Président, il existe un comité interministériel qui se penche sur l'adoption des véhicules électriques. Ce même comité, comme l'a bien mentionné, comme l'a bien expliqué l'honorable Tour, a fait des propositions pour que la flotte de véhicules du gouvernement, des cadres seniors officiels, soit convertie en véhicules électriques. On dit que l'essayer, c'est l'adopter. Monsieur le Président, je soutiens pleinement cette proposition qui, je pense, aidera à vulgariser les véhicules électriques, aidera à réduire les hésitations comme le range anxiety et en même temps changer le paysage automobile sensiblement. Dans sa deuxième réunion, le Electric Vehicle Implementation and Monitoring Committee, tombant sur le comité interministériel, viendra avec des plans d'action à 4 volets. Premièrement, facilitating the setting up of the charging network. On ne finira pas de le redire, Monsieur le Président. Le déploiement rapide d'un charging network island-wide sera déterminant pour une future adoption des véhicules électriques par les acheteurs potentiels. Number 2, financial incentives and green loans. Le gouvernement, à travers des banques et des plans de soutien, a déjà fait un travail dans ce sens et cela, Monsieur le Président, devrait continuer. Number 3, National Battery Plan, présidé par la Marina. Monsieur le Président, nous réalisons tous que les batteries ont une durée de vie limitée et que la gestion des batteries inutilisables par les véhicules électriques doit être soigneusement planifiée. Il existe déjà des processus appropriés pour le recyclage industriel des batteries de véhicules électriques dans différents pays. Cela signifie que des matières premières telles que le cobalt, le lithium, l'aluminium et le cuivre peuvent être récupérées. Une autre possibilité, Monsieur le Président, pourrait être l'utilisation dite Second Life des batteries. Par exemple, en tant que batterie statique servant à stocker l'électricité à la maison. Après tout, une batterie n'est généralement pas cassée après 200 000 km, Monsieur le Président. Seule sa capacité de stockage diminue, mais cela est moins important pour le stockage stationnaire de l'électricité que pour la voiture. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, sir, awareness and training. Cela est présidé par le Business Mauritius. Comme déjà mentionné, Monsieur le Président, la vulgarisation des technologies de véhicules électriques pour les utilisateurs et même les sociétés engagées dans l'importation, commercialisation, maintenance, réparation et recyclage a toute son importance. car sans ces stakeholders cruciaux, la révolution électrique ne se fera pas, d'où l'importance d'une coordination de l'État. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, sir, may I suggest that additionally we could consider free personalized number plates for electric vehicle owners, further fiscal incentives to swap from an internal combustion engine to a battery electric vehicle engine, scrapyard to cater for all the vehicles, inclure dans les plans de design des maisons, bâtiments commerciaux, bureaux et autres centres commerciaux, des infrastructures pour la recharge. Je voudrais, avant de terminer, Monsieur le Président, faire un appel pour que ce comité interministériel soit composé non seulement des représentants des ministères de l'énergie, de l'environnement, du transport, des finances et de la fonction publique, mais aussi des technologies de la TIC, des infrastructures publiques, des experts en la matière, de la MRIC, Mauritius Research and Innovation Council, des professionnels de l'industrie de l'automobile, des chercheurs de l'Université de Maurice. Monsieur le Président, avec pour but de mettre sur pied un plan de transition afin de devenir le prochain Norvège de l'Afrique. Monsieur le Président, nous pouvons et nous devrions aspirer à devenir le premier pays fully electric driven de l'Afrique. Cela n'aura pas que des avantages écologiques, mais aussi économiques, financiers et pratiques. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir, frankly, I don't think any manufacturer will produce cars with internal combustion engines after 2035. This is my humble opinion. Still, I cannot stress enough the fact that transition to electric vehicles must be fast and strong policies are urgently needed. Mr. Speaker, sir, the United Nations last climate report was called Code Red for Humanity. We are in a hurry when it comes to cutting emissions, so when there are alternatives that are more than good enough, why not speed things up? Je ne vais pas être aussi alarmiste et pessimiste que Jeff Bezos, patron d'Amazon, celui-là même qui était l'homme le plus riche avant d'être détrôné par Elon Musk. Ce même Jeff Bezos prédit que très bientôt la planète Terre ne pourra plus supporter ces milliards d'habitants à force qu'on y engendre pollution, dégâts sur l'écosystème. Actuellement, Monsieur le Président, il investit sa fortune dans des recherches pour coloniser l'espace stellaire, en prévoyant qu'un jour, l'homme habitera dans l'espace et que planète Terre sera devenue un natural resort que seuls les plus fortunés pourront visiter. Nous n'en sommes pas là, Monsieur le Président, et Dieu merci. Monsieur le Président, chacune de nos actions d'aujourd'hui compte et le prix sera payé par les générations futures. Monsieur le Président, le motto de mon parti, le mouvement socialiste militant, le MSM, a été « unir pour bâtir ». Avec l'évolution, nous nous adaptons aux exigences du présent, plus précisément les exigences climatiques. Et aujourd'hui, pour nous, c'est s'unir pour bâtir l'île Maurice de demain, une île Maurice verte, durable et écologique. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Suspend the sitting for 30 minutes.